Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has declared a so-called ceasefire for the days of the celebration of the 80th anniversary of victory in World War II, which will be in effect from May the 8th until 0000 on May the 11th. The Kremlin says that Putin made this decision for humanitarian reasons. In Ukraine, such a statement by the head of the aggressor country was called manipulation. In an interview with Glavred, the head of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, Sergei Kuzan, spoke about which areas Russia might focus its attacks on or after the ceasefire, and whether a comprehensive ceasefire, which the US insists on, should be expected in the future. Putin firstly understands perfectly well that he has nothing to brag about. Secondly, the armed forces of Ukraine are successfully counterattacking on many sections of the front. He also understands that Syrsky can plan a specific offensive campaign for May the 9th, when Putin will be holding his events. During them, serious defeats can be inflicted. We are already seeing this at the front, he said. Sergei Kuzan told that the level of consciousness of the Ukrainian and Russian soldiers is at different levels. Be that as it may, the quality of the fighters differs significantly, and it is quite possible that during these celebrations on May the 9th, no one will particularly refuse alcohol or partying, for example, in the restaurants of Donetsk. And it is quite possible that Alexander Syrsky, just as he successfully carried out the Kursk operation, which was unexpected for the Russians, will be able to carry out, albeit not such a large-scale offensive operation now. That is, no one is talking about a large-scale offensive, but delivering serious blows to the places where Russians are concentrated, involving not only motorized infantry units, but also unmanned systems and rocket artillery to a depth of 30 to 40 kilometers. This is a very likely scenario, he said. And if information about enemy concentrations were received, for example, for celebrations or ceremonial formations, our intelligence, which is actively working, could transmit the coordinates for strikes. Therefore, the command may already have plans for such strikes ready. So, in fact, Putin is now trying to cover up his own weak points with his demonstrative peacekeeping initiative, another possible negative scenario for Russia. If Putin manages to gather some world leaders for his parade, and at that time Moscow or its environs are subjected to strikes by Ukrainian drones, the expert added. The latest explosions at the 51st GRAU warehouse outside Moscow have already demonstrated that we can get there. If during these celebrations an air raid alarm is sounded, sabotage or strikes are carried out, or even just the fact of an arrival is recorded, this will completely discredit the Russian air defense system and all of Russia's victorious rhetoric. This is precisely why it was so important for Putin that Gerasimov cheerfully and confidently reported that supposedly Russian land has finally been cleared of the Ukrainian occupier. Otherwise, on May the 9th, all that would be left would be to invent more legends about a new Kursk bulge. That is, Putin is thus making another rather inept attempt to protect himself first and foremost. In the world, May the 8th is the day of remembrance and reconciliation, and in Russia, May the 9th is the day of their victory madness. Therefore, Putin's logic is clear. We will see what our response will be, he said. The Russian military command and dictator Vladimir Putin prematurely announced the expulsion of Ukrainian forces from the Kursk region. Fighting there continues to this day. This was reported by the Russian Z Resource Northern Channel associated with the Russian armed forces. In fact, Z Channel accused Putin and the Russian Defense Ministry of lying about the Kursk region. On the ground, the situation looks different. Fighting in the Gwevo, Gornali and Oleshnya areas continues. The enemy is resisting and it is too early to talk about full control. Severny Kanal reported. He specified that the Russian armed forces are also having problems in the Belgorod region. Fighting is also continuing in the border area there. The enemy continues to pull reserves to the border, obviously preparing for new attacks, added Z Channel. Putin announced the complete liberation of the Kursk region on April the 26th. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine immediately refuted this statement, calling the Russian dictator's words a propaganda trick and an attempt to pass off wishful thinking as reality. OSINT Project Deep State also notes the presence of Ukrainian forces in the border area of Kursk Oblast on the morning of April the 27th. According to its data, the Ukrainian armed forces control about 20 square kilometers of Russian territory, and approximately the same size territories are a grey combat zone. The defense forces continue to hold a number of territories in the Kursk region. Lieutenant General, former Deputy Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Igor Romanenko, spoke about this on the air of Radio NV. This refers to the monastery in the Kursk region and a couple of settlements, and also after the raid in the Belgorod region, Demidovka and around it. For the Russians, this is a propaganda issue that they have already liberated all of Russia's territories. This is fundamental for them, but they cannot achieve this. It is clear that they have forced out the main territory that they controlled, but it is certain that this is not happening completely, Romanenko said. He added that Russian propagandists are using the same approaches as in relation to the Luhansk region. They have been showing for years that they have captured the administrative borders, but 3 to 5% is under the control of the Ukrainian defense forces. Fake approaches are nothing new. The only thing is that the situation has become more acute now. After all, they are moving to bargaining over territories, Romanenko added.
Iranian MP Mohammad Sarraj blames Israel for port explosion. The explosion at the port of Bandar Abbas was not a random event. The explosions occurred simultaneously in 4 different locations, indicating that explosives were planted inside the containers. The chemicals usually ignite at one point and do not cause multiple explosions in different places at the same time. The containers were treated in their country of origin, either during transport or by local agents in Iran. The explosions were apparently controlled by satellite or timers and were timed to coincide with when the containers would arrive at the port and cause the most damage. The death toll from a powerful explosion at Iran's biggest port of Bandar Abbas has risen to at least 40, with more than 1,200 people injured, state media reported, as firefighters worked to fully extinguish the fire. The explosion affected offices belonging to the port, and its intensity was sufficient to cause tremors felt in nearby cities, according to domestic reports. The blast also shattered the glass of buildings several kilometers away from the site of the incident. Iranian state media also reported that there had been a building collapse caused by the explosion, though no further details were offered. The blast took place in the Shahid Raji section of the port, Iran's biggest container hub, shattering windows for several kilometers around, tearing metal strips off shipping containers and badly damaging goods inside, state media said. The incident occurred as Iran held a third round of nuclear talks with the United States in Oman. Chemicals at the port were suspected to have fueled the explosion, but the exact cause was not clear, and Iran's defense ministry denied international media reports that the blast may be linked to the mishandling of solid fuel used for missiles. A spokesperson for the ministry told state TV the reports were aligned with enemy psyops, saying that the blast-hit area did not contain any military cargo.